While digital and e-commerce have been accelerating, we've all seen that, the way we acquire customers is also completely transformed. Privacy changes from Apple and Google are impacting almost all aspects of digital marketing. And so much so that someone at one point joked that we should rename this panel How iOS 14 Ruined My Summer. Anyone else had that experience? But the good news is this panel of growth marketers is going to share how they're adapting and changing to this landscape. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Chun Wei, Head of Growth Data and Analytics at Lemonade, Vivian Chang, VP of Growth D2C at Clorox, Suruchi Shukla, VP of Omnichannel Growth Marketing at Tailored Brands, Josh Francia, Chief Growth Officer at Blueshift, and moderated by my longtime friend Adam Towvim, partner at Chameleon Collective.
All right. Thank you, everybody. This is going to be a great panel. We promise not to talk about the inner details of privacy legislation. This is really, what are we going to do as growth marketers here, okay? As Veronica mentioned, I've known Veronica for a long time, and we've dealt with these same issues. And really great to have a good set of panelists here to talk about this. So we're just going to go down the line. What we want you to do is your name and your title, what your company does, and then what keeps you up at night? Keep it quick.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Suruchi Shukla. I'm the VP of Omnichannel Growth at Tailored Brands. And Tailored Brands is the parent brand for a lot of men's apparel businesses, the Men's Warehouse, Jose Bank, K&G, and then Moore's up in Canada. What keeps me up at night? I think it's really two things. One is the health and well-being of my teams. I mean, like a lot of you guys, we're struggling to hire. The business is booming, and so I worry about is the team getting burned out. But the second thing for me is measurement and attribution, because for us, in order to really be able to grow marketing, it's important for us to prove out the impact of marketing, and there's just we are still kind of scratching the surface on the measurements.
Great.
My name is Chun. I'm the head of growth data and analytics at Lemonade. If you don't know Lemonade, we sell insurance. And we're trying to disrupt the industry with instant everything, killer prices, and a big heart. The last part is not just a tagline. We have a very unique business model that enables us to give back to our a good cause. And we just announced a 2021 version of our Give Back program. We donated over $2.3 million to 65 nonprofits. As kind of 5 to 6 years old company, I would say that's pretty good. So in terms of what's keep me up at night, two things. One, how we can continue to delight our customer. That is really challenging for insurance company. And the second one is how we can grow together with our customer. That's kind of the core thesis of our business, how to realize the LTV we know should be there.
Great.
Hey everyone, Vivian Chang. I am at Clorox, which needs no introduction, though I am part of the direct-to-consumer group. So we're bringing the capability in-house to a traditional CPG company. We run e-commerce brands, actually not for the cleaning side of it, but for Burt's Bees. We launched Brita back in February, and then we've got 6 different supplements brands, like Renew Life Probiotics is one, NeoCell, and so forth. And so what we're trying to do is, also to what keeps me up at night, is figuring out how to scale, how to build processes that translates across all of the brands underneath the portfolio. Of course, there's some nuance to it, but how do you make that a little bit more of a seamless process?
Great, I'm Josh Francia, the Chief Growth Officer at Blueshift. Blueshift is a smart hub CDP. What does that mean? It's a customer data platform that unifies your first-party data. It's smart, so it runs AI to figure out the who, what, when, and where to target your customers, and then allows you to connect your omni-channel journeys across all your touch points. What keeps me up at night are 2 things. My kids keep me up at night a lot. I have 5 kids and 3-year-old twins, so they definitely keep me up. And then I think what keeps me up at night from a professional standpoint is how to help brands not only access their first-party data, but also activate it. So they actually can create those experiences that every marketer in this room wants to do.
Excellent. So as we think about that issue about first-party data, as we think about some of the pressures that Veronica mentioned in the marketplace, a lot of times we come back to privacy. How do these digital identifiers flow through the ecosystem from one player to the next? But I think ultimately all of us here are touching that growth marketing issue in one way or another. And I guess I just want to hear from each of you, what is the biggest impact that you're experiencing? Is it something in terms of limited targeting, not being able to reach the right audiences? Is it about measurement and attribution that's the problem? Is it becoming a problem with retention because you can't follow people, even though they were your own customer, you already had a relationship with them? Is it about retention? Is it about some of the omni-channel analytics? What is the, I mean, when you hear, IDFA deprecation, or how do we prepare for third-party cookie deprecation? What's going to happen with a flock someday, or a cohort analysis? It ultimately means that we have to change the way we work as marketers. So how does that impact your tactics, the growth marketing economics? Just anybody jump in there. It'd be great. I know, Kun, you actually talked,
Sure.
When we were previously chatting, you talked a lot about how you do the analytics and the measurement.
Yeah, and so I've been actually leading an internal project to see how we can prepare ourselves for the future. There's a lot of things that's already happened, and there's more things that's coming up. So in my view, kind of put the challenges into two categories. One is the impact on measurement, so attribution, all the other things falls into this. The second is audience targeting, right? So without all this information, how can you find the right audience? For the measurement piece, I think the challenges started even before all this privacy issue came up, right? Attribution became a hot topic, multi-touch attribution became the buzzword. I actually like to ask all my candidates, do you believe in attribution?
Do you believe in attribution?
Right, yeah.
Weighty topics for anybody intending to interview at Lemonade. Keep that in mind.
It's a very telling kind of question.
And do they come back with Ted Lasso? I believe.
So I think there's different use cases. Depends on kind of what company you have and what kind of product you're trying to sell. But in my view, all these privacy challenges make multi-touch attribution even less reliable when you don't have all those touch points. When you don't have reliable way to tie them together, you have to be very careful about what you plan to use attribution for. Even if you have a perfect attribution model, it cannot tell you where you should put your next dollar. Right? So it sometimes gives you this illusion that you know what you're doing. You can put a dollar amount behind certain things. And I think this kind of privacy changes probably will trigger people to really look into incrementality test. That's a really big thing for us internally. Every big channels, small channels, if you want to launch them, to scale them, you have to do some type of incrementality test.
So if I'm a practitioner out in the audience and I'm just trying to get my feet wet around this issue, and I go home, go back to the office or my Zoom sessions next week, is that the first thing to really look at from a measurement standpoint? Is what can we be doing around incrementality because these privacy changes are having such a big impact on tactics?
Yeah, I think two things on that. One is this does impact what kind of test you can run on some platform. Right. Facebook earlier in the year basically stopped allowing people to do kind of proper A/B test. They promised to release a new version soon. I think this is the right time to really think about what you can do internally. We actually developed some in-house incrementality tool that really enable us to do things independent of the platform. There are limitations, of course, gotcha. But I think that capability is really key. The earlier you invest some effort into them, you can choose to buy some solutions out there. That's an option as well. But if you have internal resources, I happen to have a team of growth data scientists. I know not company have that luxury, but definitely invest in how you can do this smartly.
Fantastic. Vivian, when you're thinking about first-party data and first-party experiences, right? You always want to be connecting more with a potential customer, develop loyalty with an existing one. How do these impact your tactics? How do these changes in the marketplace impact what you're doing?
I think first of all, if you think about like a traditional CPG company, there is no direct customer relationship, right? It has traditionally always been through retailers or Amazon, which we all know you don't get a whole lot of data back. And then now that's part of why direct-to-consumer is in kind of an initiative that we're trying to grow within Clorox, is to build out that first-party data pool to have more, both for actually understanding consumer behaviors around product innovation and testing. There's a whole lot of things that we can do there through digital and having direct-to-consumer. And then on the other side, using it to amplify what we can do for personalization, for targeting, for having that relationship. It's still, I think that the challenge for marketers is that it's still a small slice of the pie. So we don't have that holistic customer journey. And I think that's a big challenge for marketers, is that with cookie deprecation and with privacy, it actually is getting harder to be very precise in terms of channels to the right person, the right message. We talk about it a lot, but I think it's actually tactically very hard when you have all of these walled gardens and you're not able to stitch the path together very cleanly.
What do you think we lose most when that precision of those identifiers goes away or is obfuscated? Somehow, are we having to pay more to acquire a customer? Are we losing granularity, visibility into the richness of a customer profile and their interests? What? I'm just thinking. I'm putting myself in the mind of a practitioner out there. I was like, okay, that makes sense, Vivian. But like, what's the real impact on the bottom line there?
It's a little of all of the above. So in certain contexts, you might lose that granularity of knowing, hey, this is Joe Smith or something like that. You just have an ID, or they're anonymous to you. And so really, I think what loses out is I think it's the end consumer, is that you're not able to have effective messaging that goes through the whole series, might have higher frequency towards the same person, because you're not able to really understand what that full picture is. And then it's the measurement back of this like 5 years ago or something. It was MTA. How do we actually take MTA data, put it back into the bidder, and be like extra precise about it? I think the pendulum is swinging the other way, where it's actually more just, I think, marketing intuition based in some cases, because we don't have all of those tools available to us anymore.
Right. And what about with tailored brands? When we don't have those tools, what do some people say, well, try and get that identifier, try and get a cohort. Some people lean on context, creative. How do you think about it from your perspective?
Yeah, for us, I'll make it real for you. IDFA is really having a ton of impact for us. We are a big spender on Facebook and Instagram. And until before April 26th, they used to be pretty performing channels for us, right? We would get something like a 2.5 to 3 ROAS from these channels. But then came April 26th, and we started to see a little bit of a degradation start to build in these channels for us. But then I looked at this a couple weeks ago, and just in this 4 months, our ROAS has actually gone under 1. So right there, there's a huge revenue impact that's coming from it. The challenge with IDFA kind of changes is it's very hard to really pinpoint if it is iOS that's causing the issue, or there's stuff happening in the market and that could be impacting as well. A lot of retailers coming out of COVID are running clearance deals for the last many months. Could that be causing a ROAS impact? So for us, it's all about doing a ton of device testing and really being able to assess the impact of this before we're going to go in and start talking about conversion APIs and different targeting strategies. We are, in the meantime, though, pulling back on spending because trying to also cast a wider net. So prospecting,
right.
We can't really go and target exactly the segments we wanted to go after. So instead of so our look back windows that we're using on Facebook is now 90 days, right? So they used to be a lot shorter earlier.
Yeah.
We've also changed our measurements from, we used to do 7-day view, 1-day click. We're now actually going 1-day click, 1-day view. So, because that's only the visibility that we get. So there's a lot of measurement changes that we're doing. We are changing the way we're allocating budgets unless we have this incrementality piece of it really figured out.
Interesting. And Josh, you have the benefit of seeing this across all of your customers.
Right.
And so from an omni-channel orchestration perspective, like how do you see this impacting things? How do you pull through some of the, because I mean, if you can get some consent from the users, from the customer, you can go that much further with it. How is this all impacting you?
Yeah, I think, the deprecation of third-party cookies, the deprecation of increased privacy legislation and technology companies like Apple and Google doing stuff like that, really what it is forcing brands to do is move from a transactional model with their customers to a relationship model with their customers. Mm-hmm. And if you can do that successfully, then customers don't want you to forget them. They don't want to make it hard.
Let me push back for a second. We got practitioners in the audience. What does it mean to move to a relationship model?
Yeah,
what are they going to do next week to start moving to a relationship model?
Yeah, perfect question. So a lot of our customers are doing this right now, which is everything now in marketing is all about getting that conversion, getting that ROAS, getting that next transaction. And then you say, well, I always can get the next customer, right? And so we don't really think about the in-between stages between transactions and how to be relevant and engage the customer without a transaction. And so some of our customers that do that, they find ways to provide value to the customer without requiring revenue back. And if they do that enough, the relationship starts to build that when the customer's back in market for whatever product or service they're selling, they're top of mind now. And they don't have to compete as much in the digital acquisition sphere to get that customer because they've built that relationship with the customer for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. And so some of those things, like we have retailers that will send them different tips on like what's in style and what what trends are happening, what you should wear. This is not asking for revenue. It's just really providing content for them and providing some sort of trends so they stay top of mind when they say, "Oh, I'm actually interested in buying something now. I'm going to think of that brand."
I agree. And so one of the changes we're doing is we used to put a ROAS number behind every dollar that we're putting in the market space. And now we're trying to pull back on some of that and say, maybe there is, we shouldn't have that as our KPI on some of these awareness channels, some of these relationship building channels. So I totally agree.
So, but does that put other pressures on the business to really do the context right, to make sure that the content, that the actual creative is that much more fresh or anything? Like, how does that change the focus of the business?
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, the two sides of the story. One, we are trying to change the channels that we're playing in. We're trying to modernize the marketing that we're doing. And so, moving away from things like traditional TV and linear TV, radio, and things like that, and moving more into channels that allow you to do more of that targeting. So, even in the awareness channels, going after your CTVs and streaming radios and things like that. And, obviously, as we're trying to down-age our brands, going after more of, TikToks and Snapchats of the world, building a very robust influencer program. But then the second side of the story is truly the content and the creative that you're going to put out there, and is that going to perform? One of the pieces of data that I was looking at a couple of weeks ago was just in the last year, an average American is seeing almost 4,000 to 10,000 pieces of marketing material in a day. And at the same time, you combine it with, this was a very funny way, Google actually walked me through this, the attention spans of our consumers is really declining. So if you think about a goldfish has an attention span of 9 seconds. A mobile consumer has an attention span of 3 seconds. So, which was a very funny visualization. But combine that with the number of ad creatives that somebody's seeing with that kind of an attention span, you really have to build a creative that will be memorable, that really stand out. And you have to weave your brand into that creative in order for people to really have, that stay with you. At the same time, it's important as you go into these TikToks and Reddits of the world, the content that's going to really resonate for the consumer is something that feels native. Consumers are no longer wanting to engage with any content that feels intrusive to their journey. Right? It shouldn't feel like an ad. It should feel like a part of the journey. So how do you find that balance of content creation is expensive, and you have to find ways to be able to stand out with your content, create those unique experiences, but you can only do that in so many channels. You also have to be able to make reusable content. A video, for example, that can work on YouTube, a Facebook Watch, an Instagram Reels, that's the reusability of it. And then the last point, and I'll wrap in a second, is really figuring out your creative testing framework, building that discipline and rigor behind anything that you're putting out there, because that's the only way to keep your channels performant. So quickly test and learn and get the creative that's not performing out of the mix. So.
Yeah, and it's incredible what you can do now with some of the testing, deconstructing an image and having hundreds, if not thousands of attributes, and finding out that just the presence of 3 or more people in an ad implies a family, it performs better. It gets past some of the local maximization limits that we've seen along the dynamic creative optimization and takes it to a
And it's interesting all the things you can find. So some people resonate with audios, others just don't. Like different channels actually work very differently with just even having sound or no sound. So that's the level of testing that can help you really, really get the right creative out there.
Right, and it's different for apparel versus CPG versus when you're selling insurance. So when you are selling something, a product like insurance, I imagine there's a journey that you have to take somebody through. You have to explain the importance of it, because it does tend to be something, not to be very direct about things, but how often does a house burn down? It's like, well, exactly. But you still need the insurance for it.
Yeah, so in terms of the channel mix, we're actually moving the other direction. We started with a lot of performance marketing. We had kind of some markets that we know we can easily tap into, but now as we grow, we actually want to expand more into offline, kind of the more traditional channels. But I don't approach them as kind of a brand channel, because usually I feel like that's a word that people use to group everything that's hard to measure under. It's like, oh, this is brand. We cannot measure them. So even when we do TV, we start with DRTV. We want to see, can we have some kind of signal? We understand for the more upper funnel channels, you cannot directly link that to a conversion, and you shouldn't, but you need to find some kind of signal so you know how to optimize. And with all the privacy—
Is that click-through rate? Like, what is the signal? How do you—
I mean, for DRTV, at least you do have, you can run some simple spot attribution model. You can look through kind of some of the journey to know what's the effective response rate, right? So at least you can do some optimization. But with the privacy, I think this probably make this channel kind of sexy again, right? Because ironically, when you cannot track someone down digitally, you'll find other ways to track them down. Direct mail, for example, can be really interesting, as you know, we are live, and for us, it can be really powerful information, right? But the way to measure them needs to be reevaluated. I do think kind of marketing mix modeling may have a comeback moment, not necessarily the old way that you need 5 years of data, every year you refresh them, but there's kind of a new way to do some of that modeling. So you can see your absolute spend level, how does that correlates with your actual performances. So I think that can be really interesting.
Interesting. Vivian, what about from your perspective? How do you see the need to change? Like, where are those things changing? Is it what he was talking about in terms of the marketing mix? Are you leaning more on upper funnel? Like,
yeah, I think actually in some ways similar approaches in that, yes, there's the performance foundation, search, social, affiliate, I would throw in there. And then you have these, call it traditional brand or awareness driving channels that I think it's taking a new lens of optimization against it, but it's not necessarily asking those channels to drive conversion or a transaction. And so it is, I think organically this blending is happening between like brand and performance or growth teams out of necessity, in that performance is having to move a little bit more upper funnel, and then brand wants to, you're getting pressures to at least explain what the media dollars are doing, right? Which I think is a good thing for the industry. I think the challenge is creative and content. That is really difficult to figure out, okay, if we're both playing in Facebook or even like DRTV, how much of it do you use for CTAs, promos, heavy hitting like conversion drivers versus telling the brand message and the brand story? And how do you create that at scale and iterations, and how do you approach testing? I think that's a really meaty challenge for brands to figure out right now. And we're approaching a combination in terms of resourcing. There's a couple of in-house teams making sure that the more brand-minded creative teams are working closely with performance folks, and that we've got channel people in those meetings so that we're sharing data. But then we're also tapping outside agencies, video content creators, influencers to get that volume that we need. And then in terms of channels, one of the things we're also looking at doing more and more is this content marketing and working directly with publishers for sponsored content, sponsored posts, and so forth, because we are seeing strong performance from that. I think that's also, podcasts is along those veins. Like host read is, you get much stronger performance than a pre-recorded ad. And so it's really about the integrations into all of these different content places now.
So we've talked about all these different mixes of channels and MTA, and then really just thinking about that audience and where you can get closer to them. I feel like we're talking almost like doctors and not really talking about the patient, not really talking about the user. Josh, like for the user, is first-party data really about the marketer, and are we gleaning that from channels where people respond to it and declare it? Or are we going to find a path forward where users have a little more control of that data? Like how is that going to impact us? Because ultimately, that's about a relationship between the marketer and the customers. Where can you get that data? Where do you earn the right?
Yeah, I think earning the right is critical, right? And I think there was a keynote earlier I think yesterday, that said we have to move from a platform view to a customer view, right? And I think that's very true. Like, there's obviously all these walled gardens out there will have data we will never be able to access. And that's okay, and that's their prerogative, that's proprietary information for them. But you can build your own walled garden, right? If you earn the right to do that. And you earn the right to do that by providing relevant experiences, relevant data, relevant messages, and a convenient experience for the customer to do what they want to do. And those two things are what customers want. They want privacy, but they don't want so much privacy that their experiences are irrelevant and their product and what they want to finish and do in their product, it becomes very hard. No one wants that. No one wants more friction and more irrelevance. They want highly relevant, very convenient experiences with privacy in check. And the nice thing about all these legislations and stuff, the customer's in control, right? Like we as brands have to support it, but the customer's in control, and the customer's been in control for a long time in different channels, right? Canned spam was many, many years ago. The customer was in control. Now it's going to cookies. Now it's going to other places. So really for brands, it's how do you get it so the customer doesn't want to be forgotten? The customer wants to provide you more information because it makes their experience better. And it meets their expectations. And if brands can do that, then they're building their own walled garden. And they can continue to drill, get from that well anytime they need to. And then they're building massive value for their company and for their customers.
I think that's so important. And really, you talked about raising it up to the customer's experience level. I mean, yes, we want to provide them notice and choice and the consent models and all the proper ways. But we talk a lot about privacy by design, which is incredibly important for us as marketers, as practitioners. But ultimately, we know it's still a long way until consumers really know about that. So consumers don't think about privacy by design. Right. They only hear about the news headlines when it's privacy by disaster, right? That's really right. When it comes out. Okay, so we're going to go rapid fire succession, only 2 minutes left. I just want to go down the line, prediction for next year, or some key stat someone can take away. Go back to their
I'll go with the prediction. I already gave a few stats. This is not going to be earth-shattering, but we all know that acquiring a customer has gotten more and more expensive. Just this year, 30%. I think that is going to probably grow even more as we figure out and adapt to these the changes that are happening around us. So for 2022, in my mind, is going to be the year of retention and loyalty. And we are going to start to see really creative and gamified loyalty programs come out.
Fantastic. Okay, from Lemonade's perspective, prediction or stat? Go.
I'll do predictions. So I know we talked about we won't get into too much of the regulatory part, but I think 2022 will have the potential to have all the regulation mess up all those privacy initiatives. And so there's already, DOJ lawsuit against Google. There's just another formal complaint filed to EU Commission this year. I do think Google does have kind of an interesting approach, but how they can actually execute this depends on a lot of other things. And I think this can potentially mess everything up. And GDPR, for example, is not a good experience when you give this option to people that mess up all your website design and all those kind of things.
So your prediction is Google will mess up?
Yeah, probably.
Vivian, prediction, stat.
Prediction, I guess. Along the theme of what I was saying, I think the way marketing teams look is going to change a lot. Like, you now need content creators and creative who speak the language of data and that they understand the business context of everything. And then you need growth marketers, performance marketers that are not just quant focused and who can understand and abstract to what is that customer experience, because the intuition, I think, is really key for how do you stitch all of these things together to create a comprehensive plan.
And we are over time. 10 seconds or less. Josh, prediction.
Okay, be smart, it's a stat. 81% of marketers that use AI to personalize experiences exceed revenue goals by 30% or more.
Fantastic. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our panelists.